This is The Guardian.
Hi, Pod fans. It's Max here. We finished recording about 5 minutes ago, and literally in those 5 minutes, this news broke about the incredibly sad news about Diogo Jota dying in a car crash in Spain. And there is nothing that any of the panel can say that can do justice to the tragedy of what's happened. And there's nothing I can say really, apart from our hearts absolutely go out to his new wife. He got married a few weeks ago, and to his family. We will, of course, cover this properly on Monday. And in the meantime, this is the podcast that we recorded. Of course, we had absolutely no idea this had happened, but it just didn't feel any need to get the panel back, because what can any of us say that is worthwhile at a moment like this? But yeah, incredibly sad news about Diogo Jota. And we've talked about these things before, haven't we, about how football matters, and of course it matters, and we love it, but at the same time it doesn't matter at all. And we get exercised about things that don't matter. We try and talk about the things that do matter as well, but at the end of it all, life can be incredibly fragile, and so it's just incredibly depressing. And this is our pod, and we'll speak to you on Monday. Hello and welcome to the Guardian Football Weekly. We've largely ignored transfer stuff so far this summer, but we know a lot of you are constantly refreshing the gossip pages, so why not take a little look? Rodrigo to Arsenal feels a stretch. Eze more likely. They're both really good. They could buy both and we could still talk about them needing a classic number 9. Speaking of number 9s, Manchester United want Ollie Watkins, and Liverpool are still sniffing around Alexander Isak. Hugh Geordie's yelling at the London media to stop selling their players. I'm not in London. There's Kudus to Spurs, Romero to Atlético. For the love of football, make that happen. And Barry to Everton. No, really. We'll try and work out if Crystal Palace get to play in Europe next season. We'll do some EFL too. Worrying times at Hillsborough with unpaid players and contracts ending all over the place. Worrying too at Morecambe. While radio host Robbie Savage takes over at Forest Green, my chance may well yet come. Then Tom Garry will join us from Switzerland as the Euros get underway. A scratchy win for Norway against the hosts while Finland beat Iceland. All that, plus your questions. And that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Barry Glendenning, hello.
Hello, Max.
Sanny, Rudravajhala, welcome.
Hello, Max.
And hello, Sam Dalling.
Hello, Max.
Now, before we came on air, literally a minute ago, Barry said, I have low hopes for this podcast, not because of the panel, but because the subject matter is dry. Barry, after that glittering intro, do you feel more enthused?
No, I don't, because I'd forgotten we're also discussing transfer speculation. So we've got that.
Yeah.
Crisis at Morecambe, crisis at Palace, crisis at Lyon. Robbie Savage it's not great. We're getting a bit of football in at the very end, which is nice. Yeah, I remember when we used to be a football podcast, the glory days.
Yeah, what a way to make the rest of the panel 10 feet tall. It's like Harry Redknapp with his arm round saying, "You've got this, lads."
Look,
I don't know.
Just run about a bit, lads. Let's make lemonade from these lemons.
Anyway, let's do the transfer stuff. We haven't done it a lot, and people like transfers, whether they admit to it or not. Vaguely alphabetically, if we ignore Bournemouth for a bit, Sam, Arsenal, looking positive on Eze and possible Gyökeres, have been encouraged, by all accounts, whatever that verb means in transfer speak, for their £70 million pursuit of Rodrigo, who's not guaranteed a starting spot under Real Madrid. I mean, that feels like a stretch, Rodrigo, doesn't it? I mean, a good stretch, if I was an Arsenal fan.
Does encouraged in transfer speak not mean Rodrigo's agent quite fancies a new contract, and so he's drumming up a little bit of interest because he wants an agent fee? Rodrigo wants a little bit more cash. I think that's probably it. I mean, it would be a lovely signing, wouldn't it? They would love him. They just want anyone. If they can get Eze, Eze, can you call it a return to Arsenal? He spent a little bit of time there and every other London club when he was a child, but he would be the one. He'd be wonderful. Gyökeres, they just want anyone, right? please, if you're an Arsenal fan, if they sign one of those 3 players, Arsenal fans will be absolutely delighted. And they're all very good, and they will all improve Arsenal. And I don't know what else I can really add of value to that.
Maybe Barry was right. I think the Eze signing is interesting, Sanny, where he does go, and you presume he will go. And obviously Spurs have been sniffing around for quite a long time. And if you have to weigh up Spurs or Arsenal, then you go to Arsenal, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. He's one of those players that gets you off your feet, right? And cliche as that sounds, but it's true. And there aren't that many of them. And the fact we spoke, so much about Eze last season and just what he can do, and for England too, kind of demonstrates that's quite a hard thing to have, especially in this era where Pep Guardiola's methodologies have permeated through to the fact where no one wants to beat a player. So Eze would be great, but I mean, Arsenal, they need a striker, don't they? And we've been saying this for so long. Who's he going to stand the ball up to? There's still nobody there. And yeah, he could be yet another creative, mercurial player if he went to Spurs again. But they've had so many. If I were him, yeah, I'd go to Arsenal. But I'd really hope that they have somebody, just anyone, to give the ball to. Otherwise, what's he going to do? I guess he can take it inside and score himself, I guess. But, I would choose Arsenal. I'd choose Arsenal.
I mean, I suppose, Barry, actually, for the neutral, if Arsenal fail to get a centre forward in this window, it will be absolutely sensational.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that would be brilliant, because it's all anyone's talked about. I think if I was Eze, I'd struggle to choose between Spurs and Arsenal. Thomas Frank's in at Spurs. We've seen how well wingers do under him at Brentford. I can envisage Eze in a Spurs shirt playing for Spurs as a Spurs player more than I can. It seems a better fit than Arsenal, but he would be a brilliant player for any team with delusions of grandeur to have. And I think both those sides do have delusions of grandeur. I think it would be a tougher decision than my learned friends are suggesting.
Oh, fair enough. Sam, who minutes ago said he had nothing else to add, is back in. Here we go.
I know. I'm probably going to regret it, but I think Eze, Arsenal's a better pick. He is someone I've followed for a while because he both made and ruined my Christmas back in that COVID year. Am I playing the violin here? I'd spent the Christmas day on my own, right? Because Boris locked it down as I was on the way back from a 0-0 draw between Norwich and Barnsley. I just started reporting at that point, and Boris locked us down. I couldn't go home back to my parents' house. So I stayed in London. I made Yorkshire pudding, sat on my own on Christmas Day. And my first ever Premier League game was Crystal Palace versus Sheffield United, covering that is. And Eze scored this wonder goal. And it actually, He's a glider, right? He's one of those players it's a bit like Anelka. The way he moves, it doesn't look like he's running. So he made my Christmas that day with this wonderful goal and allowed me to write something nice and fluffy, which is what I like. And then I think a couple of days later, he turned up at a QPR game. QPR were his former club, and it was the whole, why is he there? Like, it's a breach of the lockdown regulations. And then I had to go into the side of journalism, which made me realise I'm not into it, because I'm contacting press offices to try and get this headline about a young player who's breached COVID regulations by basically going to watch his old mates because he really likes them. And he shouldn't have been doing it, but I just felt really bad because I spent 48 hours haranguing Palace and QPR press offices for comment on something that didn't really matter. So he went down in my estimation slightly there, but I think overall I love him.
How were the press officers on Boxing? I mean, it's not what a press officer wants on Boxing Day, is it?
I think day after, they largely ignored me, which is what they had every right to do, just for a cheap headline.
Well, Spurs could go for Mohamed Kudus instead, available for 60 million. Sanny, apparently they've had 50 million rejected. I don't know. It feels like a lot. I mean, obviously, you just need to spend a lot of money to buy anyone. I mean, it's really interesting. For a column, was looking at the top 100 most expensive transfer fees. And if you're generous, 35, 40 of them have worked out. So you have to spend buckets on a gamble now.
No, he's not worth that. That's the short answer. But he is only 24. So you're kind of investing in that potential. It feels lazy to say he's inconsistent, but he is. I mean, that's the fact. I remember last season, I was at Man City, West Ham, and City, I think, I took my son, by the way, and he remembers it like it was yesterday. And you really start to feel old when a 5-year-old knows the exact moments. And I think it was 5-1, I think.
Get him on the pod. Get Rudravajhala Jr. on.
Get him on. He's not gone to school yet. But Kudus had a number of chances then, and West Ham actually had these opportunities early on, and City were in that weird kind of phase where things weren't quite coming together, and you just were so like indecisive in the final third, and it really kind of held him up. And I think by the time he gets to the Premier League, he'd been here a couple of years. You think you kind of have ironed that out, and he's not quite done that. He's not been massively consistent for West Ham, but then with all these players, said he's youngish. He's got a high ceiling, and that's the first time I've used a transfer talk bit of vocab on the pod. I feel disgusting for doing it, by the way. As a man who's done several transfer deadline days, I've now used that term.
What was the least interesting transfer deadline day you had? Like, where were you when nothing happened?
I've had a couple. Man United over the summer transfer window. That was a good one. I don't think anything happened. There was a great. I did Burnley. The press officer was very, very good with us, and he sent us some embargo press releases. And I, as a good Boy Scout, went and then sent those press releases on to the Sky Transfer News email address or whatever. I'm going, right, I've got it. It's Maxime Esteve it was going to sign. But unfortunately, what happened was...
Who?
You'll know him next season. He's going to be their main man in the centre half. We've talked about him many times, Barry, on this pod. We're doing EFL. Who? But unfortunately, the transfer Don, that is Dharmesh Seth, decided that rather than cross to us live in a pitch black turf moor, I'd been there all day, he just read it in the studio. And I was like, okay,
oh,
great.
No. Didn't need to be there.
I know, I could have been the man to break Esteve live on it.
How different your life would be. Barry, apparently Atleti want Christian Romero for prepared to about 60 odd million. And clearly, he's a very important player for Tottenham, but there is every part of me that would just love to see him in an Atleti shirt.
Oh, in the same way that I say I can picture Eberici Eze in a Spurs shirt. I mean, Romero to Atletico Madrid is very much to the manner born, isn't it? They are destined to be together at some point. I think just in relation to what you were saying there, Max, about transfers not working out, Sunderland have just signed a midfielder, Senegalese midfielder. He scored against England in that recent friendly, Habib Diarra from Strasbourg, 30 million. He's gone in with a bullet as their most expensive ever signing, ahead of Enzo Lefebvre, who is the guy who came from Roma on loan last season, and because they get promoted, the deal is made permanent. So they're now Sunderland's two most expensive ever signings. But I looked at the next 8 in the top 10, and it is just one disaster after another, all the way down to... until Jermaine Defoe at number 10. You've Didier Ndong, who's number 3, disaster. Asamoah Gyan didn't really fire for Sunderland as far as I can remember. Stephen Fletcher, Adam Johnson, less said about him the better. Jack Rodwell, who spent all his time there in the treatment room on 70 grand a week. Darren Bent, who I believe I like, but is not particularly popular among Sunderland fans. Wabi Kazri, and then you've got Jermaine Defoe, who was decent.
Yeah.
But so many of them do not work out.
Yeah.
And these aren't particularly high-priced transfers, but they are numbers 2 to 10, or 3 to 10 in Sunderland's list of record breakers.
But this is across the board, isn't it? This is like, there was that meme that went out a couple of weeks ago. I've Googled it now. Like Philippe Coutinho, like the most expensive player ever, according to Transfermarkt. There's loads of these, Jack Grealish.
I think ever to leave the Premier League one, because obviously there's Neymar and Mbappe higher than him. But yeah, the top 10 is mad. But the top 100, there's no... I was trying to find if there was like a sweet spot. Like actually you're better off. It's a bit like, Monopoly, if you buy the oranges. It's much better than buying the dark blues. Right, your return on investment is quicker, and you can get hotels up there much quicker. But there isn't a sweet spot. It's basically... It's always a gamble, and it's much more interesting to talk about. It's more fun, isn't it, when a new player comes, there's a big unveiling than, this midfielder who's been there for 3 years. You can't do another unveiling video. He's still here, with a video of some guy on X or whatever.
Do you reckon how this is how Brighton explain their transfer policy when they hire a new coach and they use the Monopoly example? Do you reckon that's how they...
I mean, the interesting thing is that they and I haven't looked at every single Brighton transfer, but it feels like they get it right more often than they don't, and that just is not the case. And there's another interesting point about big clubs, inverted commas, having to spend more money because there's a sort of Man United tax or whatever, but also having to buy more expensive players because fans won't necessarily be satisfied with someone who costs 20 million from, Le Havre, when actually that might be the right player to put in your team. A very exciting headline. Everton close in on signing Villarreal striker Barry. I mean, I didn't know you played for Villarreal, Barry. You probably didn't too, but you've kept it awfully quiet.
Yes, it's not me, I can exclusively reveal. It is Thiemo Barry, who's a French under-21 striker, and that is all I know about it.
No, that's fine. I didn't expect you or anyone else to know more about Thiemo Barry.
I'll tell you a little bit about him. He's
great.
He's a big lad, 6'5".
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's
so
good.
Big Barry up front. Can he get a header? I'm not sure, but did score 11 in La Liga last season and helped Villarreal, I think, get a Champions League spot, if I'm right in saying. So yeah, they value him, and he's very young, only 22 as well. So having listened to quite a few Everton podcasts on my way to transfer, what was I doing? Fixture release day at Bramley Moor Dock. I was there.
Oh, good.
Yeah, which was very exciting. Yeah, they were very excited to potentially have some new signings, and of course, since then they've announced Jared Bramthwaite is staying, which is a huge plus for Everton. So strength up top and at the back. So positive for Everton, I think.
Interestingly, at Everton, Dominic Calvert-Lewin's also announced he's leaving. And I just wonder, what kind of club takes a punt on him? He's a very up and down, patchy striker. He doesn't score many goals. He's a decent hold-up player, but he's very, very injury-prone. Seems like a nice lad, but who's going to pay him a shed load of money? I'm just curious to hear anyone's views.
We had these views, didn't we, on Monday as well? Didn't we, on Monday's pod? And the general consensus was he could do a job for Villa off the bench. I think that where the conclusion was in the end.
I mean, it's got West Ham written all over it. That's all I can say. It just feels there, and like we said, I think he could do a job as a pay as you play type guy. That would be where I would have it.
Oh, I remember this now. I wasn't on Monday's pod. I did listen to it.
Yeah.
And I remember you were talking about a pay as you play striker. And I was thinking there used to be one called what was his name? Johnny Steele or something in Tiger magazine or Roy the Rovers or one of those.
Okay.
He was basically a freelance striker who got paid by the goal.
Oh, that's what a way to play.
Yeah, you're living on the edge there. It's a very precarious way of making a living.
You're right.
Well, just on Calvert-Lewin and where the future could hold, I don't know if you saw that Tammy Abraham has taken the well-trodden path to go to Turkey. But he's still only 27. He signed for Besiktas. He's written a letter to the Roma fans that they put on their website, and that's despite him being on loan at AC Milan. So I don't know, that's the future for DCL anyway. One day he'll get his move to Turkey. He's got enough hair though; he won't need the transplant on that front.
That's true. Trabzonspor, I was calling just on Barry being 6'5" and Beto 6'4". With David Moyes there in a brand new stadium, getting it launched, big man would be glorious, wouldn't it? Jim says, is UEFA's decision to kick the question of Palace playing in Europe down the road until Lyon's relegation situation is resolved a sensible move or an abdication of responsibility? Yeah, they were due to reveal, UEFA, on the 27th of June whether Palace were cleared to play. Decision was put back to this week. On Monday, they confirmed a final decision would be postponed until Lyon's domestic appeal against their relegation from the French top flight. Due to John Textor's involvement in both clubs. Despite their enforced relegation, Lyon can currently compete in European competitions next season. However, if the French football authorities uphold Lyon's demotion into Ligue 2, Lyon, not League 2, that would be different. Lyon would relinquish their license to play in UEFA's competition, which would allow Palace a route back in. I mean, the thing is, Barry, it would just be so desperate for Palace fans, through no fault of their own, to not play in Europe next season.
It would, but this is a big story that, if I'm honest, I don't think anyone apart from Palace fans care whether Palace play in Europe. And if that sounds harsh, well, so be it. But to answer your question, I think it would be sensible and an abdication of responsibility, because I think UEFA are hoping the decision will be made for them. Then they won't have to make a decision on this, and therefore won't risk being sued by either club. The whole Leon thing seems to be an absolute mess. John Textor is obviously involved with Palace. He sold his shares in Palace to this Woody guy, not Woody from Cheers. But I don't think that deal has gone through yet. It hasn't been rubber stamped by the Premier League. So how long will that take? I don't know. You do feel for Palace fans, but this could all have been avoided very easily if John Textor had got his ducks in a row earlier, like Angelos Marinakis did at Forest, and put his shares in a blind trust in time. But he obviously didn't foresee Palace qualifying for Europe, and that's sort of it's understandable, because no one really expected them to win the FA Cup. And but here we are now, and Palace fans face an anxious wait, because it would be a great adventure for them. But to be honest, I don't think anyone else is particularly interested in whether they get to play in Europe or not.
All right, that'll do for part one. Do you think the podcast's going okay, Barry?
I'm not entirely happy with my own contribution, but otherwise,
okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, you've still got two parts to to really get into it. It's hard, it's 90 minutes, isn't it? You don't have to perform for every single minute of it. People expect perhaps you could be quiet for 88 minutes, but then 2 minutes of mercurial genius will happen at some point in parts 2 or 3.
Well, I watched the Iceland-Finland game, the opener of the Euros yesterday. Okay. So I might shine there when we get to that.
Well, here's hoping.
I'll steal Tom Garry's thunder.
The only way to find out is to keep listening, and we'll be back in a second. Welcome to part 2 of the Guardian Football Weekly. Let's talk about some EFL clubs that are in a bit of a pickle. Sheffield Wednesday, they have a number of their players have signalled their intent to terminate their contracts, leave as free agents this month due to their pay dispute with the club. Club failed to pay senior players on time for the third occasion in the last 4 months. Club wrote to players and staff on Monday offering their sincere apologies for failing to pay them on time, and have pledged to fulfil all outstanding payments, but have provided no guarantee when that will happen. It is all pretty grim.
Not good at all. I just messaged Alex Miller at the Sheffield Star just to double check a couple of things I'd seen reported elsewhere. So in case you've not quite been across it, Danny Rule, he's not returned back for pre-season training. So I think him and his entire coaching staff, bar Henrik Pedersen, have not been around. So you remember Rule had an interview for the Southampton job, which he didn't get. But I think the writing's on the wall for him. So the training sessions at the moment are being led by Andy Holdsworth, who's the sports science staff and under-21 boss. Barry Bannon's been at some of those training sessions, even though his contract's also expired. There was a story as well that he was saying he didn't want to get paid until the staff got paid, but then I've heard that's not quite accurate either. And they've been doing some sessions at St George's Park. But then there's a couple of other players, Akin Famewo being one, Callum Patterson another, whose contract's expired and then they haven't been in at all. And they're all within the rights to do that, because once you don't get paid, I think it's 15 days, and that's a FIFA rule. You can it's a breach of contract, so you can leave. So it's a complete mess on the football side. I mean, without producer Joel having to go and get this all stood up by lawyers, I'll try and box within our window here. But Chansiri wrote an 800-word letter to the fans in amongst that, very kind of like Eminem Stan style.
It was, yeah.
Lots of stuff wasn't mentioned, and basically spent all this time slagging off the Florida-based consortium who've been interested in buying it, and he wants some more money than what they originally said. And I think this consortium originally were involved in a sponsorship deal, and then there was more changes done there. So it's just ongoing. I mean, look, when you go to Sheffield Wednesday and you come through the main reception, you've got these two like gold statue elephants that flank you as you go in. Like Chansiri, over his time, we know has put in a lot of money, and in the same way, Dai Yong did at Reading. Like they invested, and probably with the right intentions, and very quickly it's unravelled. And Chansiri, the stadium's owned by this S3 group that's divorced from him. I think that group actually charged rent to Sheffield Wednesday as well. So it's all a bit of a tangle.
So hang on. He does he own the stadium as well in a different company, or it's a different company that he used to be part of?
Yeah, it's he owns it through this other company. So the club then pay rent to this company to play at Hillsborough. I mean, look, last season on the opening day, I was live pitch side. They played Plymouth Argyle, if you remember, and Argyle got dispatched. And we were there very, very early. And my cameraman, who's been around a long time, just pointed out a few spaces. Like when you have something hung up on a wall and then you take it off and there's a little space where it used to be. Like he was pointing out and saying, look, there used to be a steel sign there. It used to be a nice Sheffield Wednesday sign. That's gone now. There's just like 2 screw holes where it used to be. The ground is it's not in a great state whatsoever. Like if you've been there recently, you'll know, like very easily to see that it needs a lot of TLC. The players aren't getting paid. The staff aren't getting paid. It's all completely in the air. The manager isn't there. It's a complete mess. What Sheffield Wednesday have in the favour, I know we'll talk about Morecambe later on, it's like, look, they're a huge club and they are in the EFL. There is enough people around who are interested in buying them or would be interested in buying them if they can meet the changing asking price. I think it's 40 million at the moment, but he wants more. And they've got lots of assets there if you can get the ground as well. But it is a complete mess. And of course, in all of this, it's nothing to do with the fans. It's nothing to do with them at all. And, if Wednesday had made it to the Premier League when they were that close and things went the other way, who knows? But it's a complete mess. It needs resolution. And yet again, we're in the situation where if only we had an independent football regulator. But it is just a complete nightmare, and Sheffield Wednesday fans are living it. And what I would say to them and Morecambe fans as well, you've got to keep shouting up. You've got to keep getting the message out there. As much as the oxygen gets taken by transfer stories and the Club World Cup and rightly the Women's Euros as well, it does mean there's less airtime, there's less bandwidth for these stories to come up, especially when the negative stories, you've got no negative news in the press as it is. But you've got to keep shouting, you've got to keep flagging it up, because if you don't, you can't get the traction to get things moving.
You just don't see how they can start the season, right? What are we, 6 weeks away? They've got 16 contracted players, no preseason fixtures in. So with the ground sale, he did that a couple of years ago, right? And the point was it was similar to clubs selling their assets. He was trying to get around financial regulations and he messed it up. He got the dates wrong and they got the points deduction anyway and went down to League One. You'd imagine, so if the club was sold and there are interested parties, the ground will probably be part of it. If the club were to go into administration, which is another option, you could end up in a very dangerous situation where it's a separate asset because it's in a different company. So a bit like Mel Morris did at Derby a few years ago, basically Chansiri he still owns the ground, and so can any prospective buyers, if he doesn't like the look of them, he can say, well, I'm going to charge you something ridiculous to rent the ground, so make it impossible for them. So he retains control that way. The players getting paid is an interesting one, right? Sanny touched on it. So it's the FIFA regulation is 2 months in a row. If you don't receive your salary as a player, you can give 15 days notice, written notice, but the club can rectify that in that time, basically by paying you. What Sheffield Wednesday are doing, I don't like to use the word smart because it's a horrible situation, but they're playing some players, the ones with value. So the under 21s are getting paid. Danny Roll's getting paid because they can then get the compensation for him as and when he goes. I think they're trying to sell the young Cadamartri boy. Remember Danny Cadamartri? His boys are very good footballers.
Yeah.
So I think they're going
to Man City.
Yeah, I think they're going to sell him to Man City for $1.5 million, but who knows where that money is going to go. So they're being quite smart. The PFA came out the other day. I think ironically it was they run this off the preseason training camp for out of contract players, and it was there where they were talking about these contracts. And there's a standard contractual clause basically for serious and persistent breaches, but the problem is that is woolly, right? You have to prove. I mean, it looks like if you're not paying wages, that's probably a persistent and serious breach, but you need lawyers and you could argue that, whereas the FIFA regulation is quite clear. So the whole thing is a mess. They can't sign players. They're under these transfer embargoes as well. They've got a couple of embargoes. They owe cash to HMRC, who are going to want their money. And they got stung a couple of years ago by Derby, actually, again with Mel Morris. The taxpayer ended up losing out on quite a lot of money because HMRC went a little soft on them. So you just don't see how Sheffield Wednesday can start in the Championship in a month's time. And it's such a shame because he almost had a go. He had a go when he first came in and they got close. And did he pay a couple of million Sanny on a bet? He bought a striker last year, didn't he, from France for like $2.5 million, and he brought Stuart Armstrong in.
Yeah.
So you thought, he's going to have a go again. And the problem he's got, I reckon, is that he's, as all these people are, they're driven by money. The fact that they could get in the Premier League and the cash involved with selling the value and selling a Premier League club, that's maybe what's keeping him going. I don't know, but it's a really messy situation.
Can I ask you, Sanny, you said there, if only we had a football regulator. What would a football regulator be able to do in this instance? Because they can't force him to sell the club.
That's the big thing, isn't it? Because as with Young at Reading, when they came in, they had all the finance and had the proof, and Chansiri's wealth is in tuna, I believe, the family tuna canning business and tuna fishing business. And they've got quite a lot of it, but the value of that has gone down massively.
Well, could they have stopped him buying him in the first place? Well, I mean, isn't the idea that...
But he is invested a load of money, Max. He's he's put in a couple of $100 million. So he had the money. Yeah. And he owns the club. They can't force him to sell it if he doesn't want to.
I think they're going to have quite strong powers. I believe there's going to be various different sanctions they can put in place, financial penalties. They're going to be able to appoint people to assist running the club. They can remove the club's operating license, or they will be able to, I think. So basically, what's the value if the IFR, the Independent Football Regulator, says you actually can't operate as a football league club anymore? Then that the whole club completely loses money. Obviously, that loses its value. That naturally penalises the fans. I think they'll be able to veto owners potentially putting clubs into administration. So that will be there. So there will be quite strong powers, and I think they will have powers to remove owners as well. They might, as these things sort of drag on, so they might end up having to go to court. But because it's going to be, I think there's primary legislation, and then there's going to be all these regulations underneath it. And the problem is, you've got 6 weeks or 4 weeks to the start of the season. You just wouldn't be able to sort it out in time.
Yeah. Sam, can I ask you about Morecambe? I know it's complex, but you have been looking at this. What is the situation for them? Obviously, they were relegated this season into the National League, weren't they?
Pretty bleak. They basically, the EFL agreed a sale just before they approved a sale, sorry. So there are buyers waiting. They pumped a load of cash into it. I think they may have already paid the current owner, a guy called Jason Whittingham. They've paid him a load of money. They talked about, they put running costs into the club, potentially as loans, but we don't have visibility of that. I do know on Companies House, a couple of charges were cleared. So Morecambe had set up a loans facility previously, and someone has basically paid that off. And so those charges have been removed for Companies House. I think based on what the new buyers or the potential buyers are saying, that might have been them. So effectively, they've pumped a lot of money into it. Yesterday, they've got an independent board of directors, Morecambe, and it'd be funny if it wasn't so sad, but it's almost like, on those episodes of The Apprentice when they say, right, we're going into a negotiation, I'm going to do the speaking, and everyone's like, yeah, you're going to do the speaking. And you'll, as a viewer, you go, yeah, that's not going to happen, is it? And someone starts the speaking, and the other person jumps in, and it's a race to try and get their voice in. So what happened yesterday was the board said, the sales agreed, the owner's stalling. If he doesn't do it by 4 p.m, we're going to put the club into administration. Then it was extended to 6 p.m. Then it was overnight. Then the owner came out and said, the board are talking nonsense, and I'm paraphrasing here naturally. I'm going to dismiss the board, and which he has done. He has got rid of. Now, the thing is, if you look on Companies House, there's potentially no current directors. You are required to have a director, but any resolution to appoint a director takes effect from when it's signed. So Companies House is just where you file the form. So there could be a director. They'll need to sort that out. It may well be him. Anyway, that's by the by in some ways. They've all gone. I think what happened is basically I'm speculating, in all of these transactions, there's what's available publicly, and then there are private shareholder agreements, which are between the shareholders, and they will dictate certain things, one of which could have been that he has, and probably was, that the owner has the power to remove the board. And that's what he's done. So they're in a position where the club, again, is a bit like Sheffield Wednesday, not paying staff. There's no one senior at the club. There's just an owner. There's a deal waiting to happen. The board of directors, who are all volunteers, are on the outside of it. Again, administration is a possibility. Does Morecambe want to go into administration voluntarily? Well, the owner certainly doesn't want to. There'll be a load of creditors who basically are owed money by Morecambe. But the problem is, if the creditors push through an administration basically saying they owe us a load of money, they know they'll only end up receiving pennies in the pound in what they're owed. Whereas they also know that there is a buyer ready to come in. So they're probably going to hold off for a little bit and hope that deal is done. But it's just another example of how desperately we need that independent football regulator and how shoddy some of football ownership is.
Jason Whittingham and Colin Goldring in October 2022 were disqualified to be company directors after what happened at Worcester Warriors, where they were the owners. And they ended up being liquidated. So that's potentially, Barry, going back to football regulators, could they do something at that point? Maybe if somebody's owning a club already disqualified elsewhere, then maybe they can get involved there.
All right, that'll do for part 2. Tom Garry will join us from Switzerland, and we'll look back at the first 2 games of the Women's Euros in just a sec. Welcome to part 3 of the Guardian Football Weekly. Let's talk about some actual football. The Women's Euros covered obviously brilliantly by the Guardian Women's Football Weekly. It got underway yesterday. Finland beating Iceland in the opening game, and then Norway coming from behind to beat the hosts. Tom Garry joins us from there. Hey, Tom, you okay?
Hey, guys. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Lovely to chat to you.
Let's start with the Switzerland-Norway game, because it was a brilliant game. Right? I don't know why I was supporting Switzerland so vehemently. I've never really cared for the Swiss women's side before, but I was gutted for them, especially after that first half performance.
Yeah, I thought they played really well. They'll be really encouraged by the kind of spirited performance, because Switzerland are not traditionally very good at women's football at all, whereas Norway are sort of a fairly historic powerhouse of the women's game. So this was a relatively new thing for Switzerland to be getting excited about women's football. I'm based in Zurich near the England camp, but the game was over in Basel. But the fan park here in Zurich was absolutely jam-packed. There was like a queue to get in that was snaking around some other bars for people to try to get in. And just generally, it was quite a nice buzz around here, even though the match wasn't being played here. And the team did respond to that national enthusiasm with quite good performance. I think they'll just be kicking themselves that they didn't get anything from the game, because Norway didn't play particularly well, and yet they've still got the 3 points. So it was great. It was great fun. As a second half in particular, because the first game in the day had been pretty turgid and slow and relatively painful watch. So this was a proper football game, and I loved it. Yeah,
no, it was great, wasn't it? And I guess Switzerland, because they hit the bar. It was great effort from Geraldine Reuteler before they scored. When they scored, like, the atmosphere looked sensational, and you just feel that they, if they could have taken more chances when they had the ascendancy, right?
100%. They probably, they may live to regret those missed chances, because getting through the group now is a big ask for them. I think they were having quite a lot of success, particularly out wide. I was really impressed with Iman Bene, who's just signed for Manchester City, who was out kind of that right wing back role. They've shown they could get through, but it's just, when you have a performance like that and you don't take your chances, you must be kicking yourself. Pia Sundhage looked really disappointed at the end of the game. Legendary former US and Sweden coach, of course, and Brazil. And I think she knew what a big missed chance it was. Norway, I suppose, on the other hand, despite winning, they really frustrate me. They've got all these wonderful players like Graham Hansen, Wright and Morham and Hegerberg and so on, and they've never really seemed to click. They kind of got away with one last night, a real sort of disgusting own goal, like a sort of horrible, sort of painful thing to see, that terrible own goal that was so unnecessary to concede, kind of gifted Norway the win in the end.
Yeah, and then you had quite a lot of stuff happening, right? Because Norway scored, went ahead, and they got this penalty that Ada Hegerberg missed. It was a terrible penalty, actually. I heard Izzy Christensen, Tom, saying they should training at Lyon. that she was no good at penalties at all, and was quite surprised that she took it, given that, as you say, like Wrighton's there, Graham Hansen's there as well.
Yeah, I was also I would have probably gone with Maramielda to take the penalty. She's taken quite a lot over the years at Chelsea, for example. They had, you're right, they had like 4 other options. It was scuffed quite bizarrely from a former Ballon d'Or winner and one of the greatest strikers we've ever seen in the game, certainly at club level in what she's achieved. That was a very strange thing to see from Hegerberg. Overall, I thought she played relatively well. Obviously got the headed goal, and she's got a real mixed history in this competition. They were finalists, Norway, in 2013 when she was really young, but ever since then it's been sort of an agonising disappointment for her in Euros after Euros. But they finally managed to beat a host nation. I don't know if everyone will be aware of this, but they've played the hosts in so many consecutive tournaments. They lost to New Zealand as hosts in the last World Cup. They lost in the last Euros to England by 8-0, and of course, and then they also lost to the host France in the 2019 World Cup and lost to the host the Netherlands in the 2017 Euros. So they finally managed to find a host that is inferior enough to get a win in a major tournament.
Yeah, I mean, Switzerland got a penalty straight after the Hegerberg penalty. It looked soft, and then it was disallowed for the minutest toe offsides in the build-up. Tell us just a little bit about Gemma Granger, the only English coach at the Euros, is coaching Norway. How did she end up there?
Well, she had a relatively good spell with Wales that seemed to be encouraging, and Wales were kind of getting towards a major tournament, didn't quite make it to the World Cup. And I think there was massive disappointment across Wales when she then decided to go for the opportunity at Norway. I think Wales felt that they had somebody there who was a long-term plan, and but no, she decided to make the move with the chance to coach this group of very top-class individual players who've never really pulled things together at a tournament. And I think she felt she could be the one to take them to that next step to finally start to deliver. She's very well thought of amongst the English FA, for example. And I noted a couple of days ago when we had the chance to talk to Mark Bullingham, the FA CEO, and he was talking about kind of long-term, his positivity for the long-term succession options for England. He mentioned not only that Casey Stoney was a head coach at Canada, he also mentioned Gemma Granger at Norway, almost hinting that experience might put her in the frame in the very, very long term to be a future England head coach. So she's coached a lot in the English youth setup and is well thought of. But this is almost like women's football sort of impossible job, forgive the cliche, but Norway have kind of been annoying to watch, a little bit like watching England's men in the kind of that post-Sven era, or maybe even during that Sven era, where you always knew they could win something, but they could never quite make it click. And she's taken that job on. My gut feeling is they could go quite far, mainly because the draws opening up for Group A. They might get to a semi-final without having to play any of the top sides. So it could really start to open up for somebody like Norway if they can keep winning.
Now, keep your powder dry, Tom, because Barry has a full report on Iceland. Finland has already announced that this would be his high point of the podcast. Barry, Tom's already called it turgid. What did you make of it?
Yeah, it was quite turgid. Finland beat Iceland. Iceland were the favourites for this game, didn't play well at all. Not helped by the fact that they lost their best player and captain, Kudus Vigesdottir, to an injury at half-time. She went down needing treatment twice in the first half, didn't come out for the second. Then, just before the hour mark, they lost Hildur Antonsdottir to a red card. She got 2 bookings in, I think, the space of 7 minutes, and can't really have any complaints about either, I would say. Katarina Kosola, Finland's midfielder, was the best player on the pitch by a mile, and it was her that scored the winning goal. But Finland were never really that comfortable with their lead. Iceland in Svendis Jonsdottir have a long throw merchant in the Rory Delap vein, and she had a lot of opportunities to chuck the ball long into the box, and it was a constant source of chaos that Finland never looked comfortable with at all, but they always managed to just about scramble the ball clear And on another day, Iceland probably could have scored one or two. And Svendis also had a couple of good chances to equalise, but couldn't get her shots on target. So Finland just about got over the line, I would say largely due to a consummate exhibition of time wasting by their goalkeeper, Anna Koivunen, who her game management is top class, I would say.
Tom, presumably you've got nothing to add to that.
Can I say one thing about the long throws? There was a moment at the end of the game that was quite agonising to watch as a neutral when in stoppage time, we'd already gone past the allocated added minutes and Jonsdottir got a long throw. And when you're sort of thinking, quick, take it quickly, quick, get it in the mixer. And she stopped to wipe the ball with a towel that was by the side of the pitch, which must have taken a good extra 15 seconds of the time they had just to try. And it wasn't the best of throws either, even after wiping it away. Look, it was never going to be a great game. It was about 34 degrees locally at kickoff in turn with two relatively weak sides. And I always feared it wouldn't be the best opening fixture, but hopefully people won't judge a book by its cover because the quality sides in this tournament are all still yet to come.
Yeah, I got Belgium, Italy, Spain, Portugal then today. What's the latest on Bon Mati?
Well, the increasing whispers from the camp in Spain imply that she might play, which would be a quite remarkable turnaround from being in hospital barely a week ago. She surely won't be able to do 90 minutes. Surely they're going to have to try and look after her fitness. But she has recovered well, we're told, from viral meningitis after that scare. And generally, although we wait to see the team news, the noises that we're hearing from those close to the Spain camp is that there is optimism she might be included in the team, which would, from where we were a week ago, and her whole tournament seemed in jeopardy, that's a quite positive move for the current Ballon d'Or winner.
All right, Tom. Hey, thanks for coming on. We'll chat to you soon.
Real pleasure, guys. Nice to see you.
Tom Garry there. And of course, Guardian Women's Football Weekly is on 3 times a week. We'll chuck a few of their pods in our feed as well. So subscribe to that. Finally, we should welcome Robbie Savage to Forest Green. Signed a 4-year deal after a really successful season at Macclesfield. Saw them promoted. He said, I know there'll be a bit of scepticism because I've only had 1 year in management. I know I'll have to win fans over. I'm not scared of that. I got released from the biggest football club in the world at 19, told I wasn't good enough. I've always proved people wrong because I've got a great work ethic. I spoke to Brendan Rodgers, Martin O'Neill and Sean Dyche, and they all said, what an opportunity. In unison, I like the idea that they all said that. Everybody wants to help me, so that goes to show I must be okay because they're willing to help. Sam, you spent a bit of time with them last season.
Yeah, I went in it and I was very lucky to do a behind-the-scenes piece where he let me in to all of it, basically, dressing room, manager's office, which is quite rare. I think it was a bit of a shock, right? I think this is playing out as a bit of a drama, Coronation Street EastEnders style, because Savage went in, for people not aware of the story, Macclesfield, there was that BBC documentary, they're in a terrible state. A guy called Rob Smethurst, who is the owner and or the majority owner and one of Savage's best mates, basically rang him and said, I bought this football club, can you come in? And Savage said yes. And he's been there for the last 3 or 4 years and he's poured his heart and soul into it. Initially, he was director of football. And then the last guy, a guy called Michael Clegg, not the one who used to play for Manchester United youth team, but another guy. He took him to the playoffs, got to the final, lost, and Savage basically sacked him, which felt a little bit harsh. And Savage was installed as manager. So it was his first season in management. And a couple of weeks ago, he signed a 2-year contract. And it wasn't just that he signed a 2-year contract, though I can't quite work it out because he keeps saying he's never been paid anything and it's all sort of love and time. And I don't know why you need a piece of paper to say you're going to commit your love and time to the club. But he signed a 2-year contract and the thing is, he's very big on statements, right? We know he likes to talk. So I can't leave that dressing room. I'm on the journey with them. I can't leave Rob. What we've been through together is amazing. And a couple of weeks later, he's going to Forest Green Rovers, which, if we look at it objectively, right, if you take the emotion out of it, it's a league above. It's Macclesfield are a team going into the National League North, unknown quantity, albeit with a decent squad. They always had a squad for a couple of leagues above. Forest Green got close to promotion back to the Football League and have ambitions. And a former Wales teammate, Mark Bowen, has gone in. So things have happened very quickly. And football is one of those industries where you can't blame people for making the decision that's best for them and best for their family, but it hasn't gone down well. And Rob Smethurst, they both did videos on the day of the release, and you could see how disappointed Rob Smethurst was with Robbie Savage, because Savage is also part owner, right? So that friendship may well be ruined. They expected to lose him, not quite this soon, and then the real knife is that he's taken 3 of the players, and they've already gone. And there is wing backs and a centre half called Mendy. And again, like Mendy, I went in a couple of years ago and interviewed Alex Bruce, who was manager, and Alex Bruce was telling me that he was having to ring Mendy's boss at a restaurant where he worked because he needed some time off because he was a kitchen porter. So he's taken Mendy from there to being a professional footballer. Yeah. So that is massive. But Smith stopped short of saying it, so I have to be a bit careful. But in the video, he basically says there are 3 players he wants to take, and we can't stop them because Robbie knows exactly what is in the contracts and the get out clauses and things like that, the buyout clauses. So they lost those 3 players quite close to the start of the season. And John Rooney, brother of Wayne, who I think scored 12 goals for them last year, he's taken over as manager, but effectively he has said he isn't going to play. So they've lost 4 of their massive players. They've lost their manager and everything that comes with it. And Savage, I actually really liked him. I know he has this Marmite effect and maybe more one side than the other. I found him sincere and quite, I want to say genuine. He talks a lot, but his heart's in the right place, and you could tell how much it meant to him and how much he loved it. I think he's actually quite insecure, and he talks a lot about, I've heard him say that line before about having to always fight against it in my life and prove people wrong. So he's an interesting character. At his age, as he turned 50, I think, it would have been easy for him to sit on his radio show and talk about managers and criticise managers.
Hang on, that's not easy. A radio show is not easy, Sam. Let's be clear about this.
He has always wanted to do it. He didn't need to do it.
Yeah.
And he has gone in at a low level, and he wants to prove himself, and he does believe in himself. And whether he's got delusions of grandeur, who knows? But he is giving it a go. So it's a really hard one. I don't know how to feel about it. The guy he sacked previously, Michael Clegg, has said, it's come out on Twitter and said basically, well, my nan could have got that squad up with 100 points. Savage took over when he knew that we built the squad. And I think he described it last year as manager as like driving a Ferrari with the passenger yanking the wheel every 10 minutes. So it's a bit of a circus. It's been a bit of a drama, but you've got to say good luck to him, right?
Yeah, good luck to him. And, he'll need to finish his team talk quickly to be ready for 6:06, won't he? Anyway, that'll do for today. And Barry is smiling. So there we all are. Everybody's happy. Thank you, Sanny.
Thank you. Max, if you could humour me for one moment, by the way, just at the time we're at. Yeah. We're used to watching a lot of host broadcasters at the moment with the Club World Cup and all that. This podcast, and there's very few outlets where you will get actual honest criticism, where people can be honest about football. And I noticed yesterday in Robin Cowan's commentary, she did say that Norway were playing quite poorly. And I thought it struck me that very few places would be allowed to say that outright. So don't forget the value of the pod, even when it might feel a bit boring, Barry. There's no vested interest here. You can actually say what you really think and know you're not going to get any comeuppance. So yeah, cheers for having us on.
No, my problem isn't. I just think it's quite sad that we are reduced to talking about these things that we shouldn't have to talk about, and that I don't feel particularly comfortable talking about because I'm not an expert in the hedge funds and takeovers and administration and all that sort of stuff. But this is where we are now.
This is where we are. Thank you, Barry.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Max. And given the theme, as an existential point, I have to remember, I do this in my job as a lawyer. You go looking for all this company's house stuff. None of it exists. None of it is real. We made all this stuff up. All these chains of ownership and everything there is. It's not real. They didn't have it.
Scripted. The whole thing is scripted. Football Weekly is produced by Joel Grove. Our executive producer is Phil Maynard. We'll be back on Monday.
This is The Guardian.